The gavel fell, a thunderclap in the suffocating silence, sealing not a transaction of land or livestock, but the unimaginable fate of a woman, heavy with child, and her sightless daughter. In that dust-choked arena, amidst the callous stares and the scent of desperation, an anomaly emerged. A black cowboy, enigmatic and silent, who offered the winning bid for this human wreckage. What ancient sorrow or buried debt drove his hand to this impossible act, forever altering the course of lives bound by circumstance and the brutal whims of a merciless world? The air crackled with unspoken questions, with the lingering dust of forgotten histories, as the raw cruelty of the moment etched itself into the very fabric of existence. Every gaze was a barb, every whisper a lash, as the transaction, so deeply rooted in the soil of injustice, unfolded. The woman, Sarah, felt the tremors of the earth beneath her bare feet, an echo of the tremor in her own soul, her hand instinctively reaching for her daughter's, a silent promise of protection against a future she could not fathom. Her daughter, Clara, though blind to the harsh light, felt the cold weight of the stairs, the shifting currents of fear and pity, sensing the shift in their shared destiny with an unnerving clarity. This was not merely an auction, it was a crucible, forging new bonds from the wreckage of old lives. The cowboy, Elias, stood apart, a shadow amongst shadows, his intentions shrouded in the same dust that clung to the worn leather of his boots. His face, etched with lines that spoke of a hard-won solitude, betrayed nothing of the tempest brewing within. The transaction was complete, but the story had only just begun. The whispers of the crowd died down, replaced by the heavy thud of their own hearts, beating in a rhythm of disbelief and apprehension. A dramatic silence enveloped the scene, pregnant with the weight of untold stories, of choices made in the crucible of desperation, and the fragile hope that sometimes, even from the darkest depths, a flicker of redemption might ignite. This pivotal moment, a stark tableau of human vulnerability and unexpected intervention, promised a narrative fraught with tension, deep emotional complexity, and the slow, arduous path toward an unforeseen future, a journey into the heart of what it meant to truly be free. Before we get into this tale, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from, and subscribe if you want more content like this one. The dust of the auction house, thick with the scent of human despair and stale tobacco, clung to everything, a suffocating shroud that followed them out into the unforgiving sun. Sarah, her swollen belly a constant heavy reminder of the life burgeoning within her, stumbled, her legs threatening to give way beneath the crushing weight of relief and an even heavier burden of fear. Clara, her small hand gripping her mother's, navigated the rough terrain with a quiet grace, her sightless eyes fixed on some unseen point, perhaps an imagined horizon. Elias, the black cowboy, led their horse with an unnerving silence, his broad back a testament to years of toil under a relentless sky, yet also a barrier, an impenetrable wall between them and the answer to the profound question that gnawed at Sarah's soul. Why? His presence, both a salvation and a mystery, dominated the vast, empty landscape that stretched before them, a canvas of cracked earth and skeletal trees that mirrored the desolation in her own heart. The road they traveled was less a path and more a suggestion, carved by the relentless passage of time and the indifferent hooves of cattle, leading them deeper into a solitude that felt both menacing and strangely, desperately needed. Every creak of the wagon wheel, every distant cry of a hawk circling high above, served to amplify the suffocating quiet that lay between the three of them. Sarah dared not speak, her throat tight with unasked questions, with the bitter taste of helplessness. Clara, sensitive to the subtle shifts in the air, the nuances of Elias's presence, felt a strange, nascent curiosity begin to stir, an unlikely counterpoint to her mother's apprehension. Elias, for his part, offered no explanations, no reassurances, his silence as vast and as unyielding as the land itself. He moved with a purpose that seemed entirely his own, his gaze fixed on some distant, unseen marker, leaving them to grapple with the terrifying uncertainty of their new reality. The sun beat down, a relentless hammer driving them forward, each step taking them further from the public spectacle of their purchase, and closer to whatever private hell or fragile heaven awaited them at Elias's destination. The journey was a crucible, shaping their fears and their fledgling hopes in equal measure, a silent, tense negotiation of power and vulnerability under the indifferent gaze of the endless sky. Days bled into a week, each sunrise painting the same desolate landscape across the horizon, as their makeshift convoy pushed deeper into the unforgiving expanse. Elias's homestead materialized like a mirage, not a haven of comfort, but a stark collection of weathered wood and sun-baked earth, a testament to raw survival. It was a place born of necessity, forged in isolation, its quietness amplifying the thrum of Sarah's own anxieties. The single cabin, smelling faintly of dust and dry herbs, offered little more than shelter, yet for Sarah, it was a sudden, dizzying luxury after the open road, a faint whisper of safety for the child within her. Clara, her small hands tracing the rough-hewn walls, seemed to absorb the nuances of the new space with an uncanny precision, her hearing acutely attuned to the subtle shifts in the wind, the distant murmur of wildlife, the heavy thud of Elias's footsteps. Sarah watched Elias, his movements deliberate, efficient, devoid of unnecessary flourishes. He was a man carved from the very land he inhabited, stoic and unreadable. He provided food, water, a rough blanket, his gestures blunt but undeniable. There were no explanations offered, no grand pronouncements of intent, only the stark reality of their new existence, tethered to the will of this enigmatic man. Sarah's desperation for her unborn child's safety warred with a simmering resentment, a quiet indignation at her own powerlessness. She was property still, even if the chains were invisible, woven from circumstance and the arbitrary mercy of a stranger. Elias's silence was a wall, thick and unyielding, yet beneath it, Clara, with her heightened senses, seemed to perceive faint tremors, a hidden complexity that eluded her mother's fear-clouded understanding. Was it kindness that prompted his deed, or a darker, more intricate web of obligation? The question hung heavy in the air, unspoken, yet palpable, as the days unfolded into a tense rhythm of survival, each moment a silent negotiation of trust in a world that had offered them none. The harsh light of day gave way to the profound darkness of night, a darkness that brought with it the chilling sounds of the untamed wilderness, sounds that heightened their vulnerability, making Elias's stoic presence both a comfort and a source of profound unease. The relentless sun, a harsh master, beat down upon Elias's solitary world, etching deeper lines into his weathered face, each one a testament to battles fought and losses endured. His land, scorched and unyielding, was a mirror to his soul, stark, unforgiving, yet possessed of a deep, resonant strength. He moved through his days with the quiet intensity of a man carrying a heavy, unseen burden, the weight of a past that had carved him into this formidable, enigmatic figure. It was not pity that had driven his bid at the auction, not a simple act of charity. His motives were far more intricate, woven into the very fabric of his being, rooted in a specific, harrowing memory that still clawed at the edges of his sleep. He remembered the sting of the whip, not on his own flesh, but on that of a young woman, no older than Sarah, her eyes wide with a fear that transcended the physical pain, a fear for the child she held tightly against her breast. He had been powerless then, a boy himself, forced to watch the casual cruelty of a world that saw people as mere chattel, a lesson burned into his marrow. The memory was a recurring nightmare, a silent scream that echoed through the desolate canyons of his mind, a perpetual wound that never truly healed. That day, years ago, he had vowed with the fierce, unwavering conviction of youth that if he ever had the means, if fate ever presented the opportunity, he would intervene, he would stand against such an injustice. It was not a vow of heroism, but a promise made to the ghost of his own helplessness, a silent oath whispered into the dusty winds of despair. The sight of Sarah, pregnant and vulnerable, her small daughter clutching her hand, had ripped open that old wound, a raw, aching reminder of the injustice he could not prevent then. This act, purchasing them, was not about saving them, not entirely. It was about saving a part of himself, about finally wielding the power he had lacked, about striking a blow against the very system that had scarred him. The ghosts of the past, relentless and unforgiving, demanded this reckoning, this impossible, morally ambiguous redemption. His heart, a hardened stone, held within it a molten core of unresolved pain, a complex tapestry of grief, and a fierce, unyielding need to right an ancient wrong, even if the path to doing so led through the bleakest of moral landscapes. The fragile threads of tentative trust began to weave themselves into the harsh tapestry of their daily existence, tenuous and easily broken, yet undeniably present. Sarah, haunted by the specter of past betrayal, moved with a cautious grace, her every action a silent question mark. She watched Elias, observed his quiet rituals, the way he mended a fence post with practiced hands, the way he coaxed a meager flame from dry kindling, the way his gaze, though rarely meeting hers, held an unreadable depth. He spoke little, his words sparse as the desert rain, yet each instruction was clear, each gesture, however gruff, possessed an underlying consistency. He never raised his voice, never demanded more than what was necessary, and in that steadfast predictability, a flicker of something resembling security began to take root in Sarah's ravaged heart. Clara, unbound by the visual world, became the unexpected conduit. Her small, agile fingers explored the textures of the cabin, the coarse fabric of Elias's worn shirts, the smooth coolness of a stone he'd left on the table. She listened, not just to words but to the nuanced rhythms of Elias's breathing, the subtle shifts in his posture, the almost imperceptible changes in the air around him. She sensed the quiet sadness that sometimes clung to him like dust, the moments of fierce, protective stillness that would settle upon him when a coyote howled too close to the cabin at night. Clara's innocent questions, delivered with a gentle insistence, were the only words that seemed to pierce Elias's carefully constructed silence, eliciting grunts that sometimes evolved into a surprising, gravelly softness. He would show her how to tell the difference between wild herbs by scent, or guide her hand to feel the distinct grain of different woods. In these small, shared moments, Sarah witnessed a facet of Elias she had not anticipated, a man capable of a quiet patience, a hidden tenderness buried beneath layers of hardened resilience. The tension remained, a low hum beneath the surface, but it was now laced with an emerging understanding, a tacit acknowledgement of their shared, precarious existence. Each day was a testament to the slow, arduous process of building something from nothing, of finding a fragile peace in the heart of uncertainty, a silent promise whispered between souls, scarred by a world that had offered them little but sorrow. The fragile peace that had begun to settle over Elias's isolated homestead was shattered by the distant drum of approaching hooves, a sound that carried across the vast empty plains like a premonition of disaster. Elias, who seemed to possess an instinctual understanding of the land's language, froze, his gaze narrowing on the distant cloud of dust rising against the horizon. Sarah felt an icy grip seize her stomach, the familiar chill of dread, a primal understanding that their precarious sanctuary was about to be breached. Clara, her small face turning towards the sound, clutched her mother's hand tighter, her sensitive ears picking up the distinct, heavy rhythm of men on horseback, a sound that spoke of purpose, of pursuit. The men, a rough-looking contingent led by a figure Sarah recognized with a sickening jolt, the former overseer from her old life, a man whose cruelty was a living legend, rode with an arrogant confidence, their faces grim masks of self-righteousness. They were the embodiment of the societal biases Elias had implicitly defied, the very face of the conflicts that scarred this broken land. Their arrival was no accident. They had come to reclaim what they believed was theirs, to reassert the brutal order that Elias had, with a single audacious bid, momentarily disrupted. Elias, his hand dropping almost imperceptibly to the worn handle of the revolver at his hip, moved with a quiet swiftness that belied his earlier stillness. He positioned himself between the cabin and the approaching riders, his posture resolute, his silhouette stark against the setting sun. There was no fear in his eyes, only a cold, unwavering determination. The air thrummed with an escalating tension, thick and suffocating, as the distance between them closed, bringing with it the acrid smell of dust and the unspoken threat of violence. Sarah's heart pounded against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror for herself, for Clara, and for the fragile life stirring within her. This was the moment the hidden storm finally broke, the moment their fragile, hard-won peace was put to the ultimate test. The quiet wilderness, once a symbol of their isolation, now became the stage for a confrontation born of avarice and the deeply ingrained belief in ownership, a stark reminder that even in the most remote corners, the shadow of injustice could always find a way to cast its chilling pall. The confrontation hung in the air, thick and acrid as gunpowder smoke, before a single shot was even fired. The overseer, a man whose face was a roadmap of petty tyranny and a lifetime of entitled cruelty, reined in his horse just yards from Elias, his grin a chilling sneer of possession. "Well, well, Elias," he drawled, his voice grating like rusted metal. "Fancy finding you playing house. You bought what was mine, boy, and now I've come to collect." His words were not a request but a decree, laced with the casual arrogance of a man who believed himself above all law, save his own distorted moral code. Sarah, peering from the narrow crack in the cabin door, saw Clara pressed against her, her small body trembling. The weight of the world, a suffocating blanket, settled upon Sarah's shoulders. Elias stood his ground, a formidable presence, his silence a more potent weapon than any shout. His gaze, unblinking, met the overseer's, a cold, hard challenge that spoke volumes without a single word. "She ain't yours." Elias's voice was a low rumble, devoid of inflection, yet resonating with an undeniable authority. The bluntness of his statement hung in the tense air, a gauntlet thrown, stripped bare of niceties or pleas. The overseer's eyes narrowed, his casual cruelty sharpening into a venomous rage. "She's property, Elias, and you, a black man, have no right to question what's mine." The racial slur hung in the air, a deliberate provocation, meant to diminish, to incite. Elias did not flinch. His hand remained steady on the revolver, his knuckles white. This was the precipice, the moment where the years of injustice, the memories of helplessness, converged with the desperate need to protect. Sarah's breath hitched in her throat. She understood then, with a searing clarity, that Elias was not merely protecting them as his possessions. He was defending an abstract ideal, a fierce, unspoken rejection of the very system that had birthed this cruel tableau. This was more than a standoff. It was a silent battle for dignity, for the right to simply exist beyond the arbitrary claims of others, a stark and brutal choice presented under the indifferent blazing sun. The overseer's face, contorted by a rage born of thwarted entitlement, twisted further. "You think you can just buy what you want, boy? Think you're a man now?" His words were laced with venom, the old order's desperate cry against a world that dared to shift. Elias, however, seemed to have retreated into a core of unyielding stone. He did not engage with the insults, did not rise to the bait, his gaze fixed not on the overseer's sneering face, but on something unseen, something beyond the petty cruelty of the moment. It was a look that spoke of a deeper pain, a far older wound that this present conflict merely exacerbated. He remembered the face of his mother, her eyes wide with terror, not for herself, but for him, a child, as the slave driver's whip whistled through the air. He had been a boy, hiding in the tall grass, powerless, the shame of his helplessness burning a hole in his chest. He had seen countless acts of barbarity, the casual brutality inflicted upon those deemed property, the dehumanization that stripped away spirit until only fear remained. His own freedom, hard won through desperate flight and years of relentless labor, was a fragile thing, perpetually threatened by men like the one before him. This wasn't just about Sarah and Clara. It was about every voiceless scream, every tear shed in silent despair. His purchase of Sarah and Clara had been an impulsive act. Yes, driven by a raw, primal surge of recognition. Sarah's terrified eyes mirroring his mother's, Clara's blindness a metaphor for the willful blindness of the world. But beneath the impulse lay a lifetime of simmering resentment, a deep-seated need to reclaim a sliver of dignity for his people, for himself, for all who had been treated as less than human. The overseer's threats, his casual cruelty, were simply the catalyst that ignited a fire that had long smoldered within him. This was the moment of reckoning, not just for Sarah's freedom, but for his own soul. for the haunting specters of a past he could never truly escape. He was not a hero, not in the traditional sense. He was a man forged in the fires of injustice, seeking a brutal, imperfect redemption, a solitary warrior battling the ingrained evils of a world unwilling to change. The standoff dissolved not in violence, but in a tense, guttural retreat. The overseer's party riding off with muttered threats, their faces etched with a frustrated fury that promised future reprisal. Elias remained standing, unmoving, until the last whisper of their horses faded into the vast silence. Only then did he turn, his shoulders slightly slumped, the rigid tension leaving his frame in a slow, almost visible exhalation. Sarah emerged from the cabin, her hands pressed to her swollen belly, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and dawning comprehension. Clara, sensing the shift in the air, the easing of the profound dread, took a hesitant step forward, her small hand outstretched. The quiet that settled upon them was different now, no longer merely silent but weighted with an unspoken understanding, a new vulnerability laid bare. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and fiery oranges, a dramatic backdrop to their fragile truce with the world. That night, as the coyotes howled their mournful laments, a different kind of storm began to brew within the cabin. Sarah's pain started slow and insistent, then building with a relentless urgency. Elias, stripped of his usual stoicism, moved with an uncharacteristic clumsiness, his rough hands fumbling with cloths and water, his gruff exterior cracking under the immense pressure of the moment. He had faced death countless times, but this raw, visceral act of creation, was an unknown territory that humbled him, exposing the cracks in his carefully constructed armor. Sarah cried out, her voice raw, primal, and Clara, nestled close, whimpered with a fear that transcended her blindness, sensing her mother's agony. In the flickering lamplight, bathed in the sweat of Sarah's struggle, a different kind of birth took place. It was not just the arrival of a new life, but the birth of a fragile, complicated bond between these three disparate souls. The pain, the fear, the exhaustion, all culminated in a single piercing cry as the baby arrived, small and squalling, a defiant spark of life in the desolate wilderness. Elias, his face streaked with dirt and exhaustion, looked down at the tiny, fragile being, and for the first time, a flicker of something akin to awe, to tenderness, softened the hard lines of his countenance. The world shifted on its axis, a pivotal, emotional climax reaching its zenith in the quiet, humble confines of that remote cabin, transforming the very meaning of their shared existence. The silence that followed the baby's first cries was not empty, but filled with the profound echoes of a new beginning, a fragile, desperate hope born from the very jaws of despair. Sarah, utterly spent, lay back, her eyes closed, a faint smile touching her lips as the tiny, squirming bundle was placed gently against her chest. Clara, her fingers tracing the soft, downy head of her new sibling, let out a soft, almost reverent sound of wonder. Elias stood apart, a silent sentinel, his gaze fixed on the new family unit, a flicker of something undefinable softening the hard lines of his face. He was not a man given to grand gestures or eloquent words, but in the way he meticulously added wood to the fire, ensuring a steady warmth, in the careful way he filled a cup with water and placed it within Sarah's reach, there was a profound, unspoken commitment. The immediate danger had receded, but the scars remained, etched into the landscape of their souls, a testament to the brutal realities they had faced. The cabin, once a mere shelter, now felt like a sanctuary, a fragile bubble of warmth against the cold, indifferent world. The harshness of the land outside still promised challenges, but within these four walls, a new kind of family had been forged, bound not by blood or societal decree, but by shared vulnerability, by an unspoken promise of protection, and by the profound, life-altering act that had brought them together. Elias remained an enigma, his past still shrouded in a silent, complex narrative, but his actions had spoken louder than any words. He had rescued them, yes, but in doing so, he had also, perhaps, begun the long, arduous journey of rescuing a part of himself, a soul long hardened by a world that had offered him little but pain. The baby's soft cries, the faint rustle of dry leaves against the window pane, the gentle warmth of the fire, These were the new rhythms of their existence, a quiet symphony of survival, and the nascent stirrings of a future shaped by hardship, yet infused with an unlikely, hard-won hope. The vast empty spaces outside still loomed, but within the small circle of their shared light, a profound transformation had taken root, promising a path forward, however arduous, towards a future that held, for the first time, the possibility of peace. The sun, an impartial witness, continued its ancient journey across the vast western sky, casting long, lean shadows that stretched and shrank with the passage of days. Life at Elias's homestead settled into a new rhythm, a quiet cadence dictated by the rising and setting of the sun, the needs of the baby, and the relentless demands of the land. Sarah, still fragile but gaining strength with each passing day, moved with a newfound purpose, her hands tending to the small garden Elias had helped her start, her voice a soft hum as she nursed her infant. Clara, no longer shadowed by fear, explored their world with a keenness that transcended sight, her fingers tracing the rough bark of trees, her ears attuned to the distant chirps of birds and the subtle murmur of the wind through the tall grasses. She would sit for hours, listening to Elias work, sensing the quiet precision of his movements, the steady beat of his heart. Elias, in turn, found himself unexpectedly tethered to this small, unconventional family. His days still held the solitary rigor of his ranching life, but now the cabin awaited him, not empty, but filled with the soft sounds of life, with the scent of cooked food, with the presence of others. He still spoke little, his words economy itself, but his actions spoke volumes. He built a small swing for Clara from a sturdy tree branch, repaired a leaking roof with meticulous care, his presence a constant, unwavering anchor in their turbulent world. The scars of their past remained, vivid and undeniable, but they no longer defined their every moment. They were now woven into the fabric of their shared history, reminders of the darkness they had traversed and the light they had found. The outside world, with its judgments and its cruelties, still existed, but within their small, isolated sanctuary, they had forged something resilient, something profoundly human. It was not a perfect peace, for peace in such a world was always a fragile, hard-won commodity. But it was a beginning, a testament to the unexpected connections that could blossom even from the most barren soil, a silent, powerful affirmation that even in the face of profound injustice, hope could find a way to take root, blossoming in the quiet, sun-drenched moments of their extraordinary, shared existence.